The air was thick with the scent of fresh-cut grass and the faint tang of chlorine from the community pool. It was a Saturday in late June, the kind of day where the sun didn't just shine out pressed down, heavy and unyielding, on the manicured lawns of Willow Creek Estates. The neighborhood was a postcard of suburban perfection, identical beige houses, white picket fences, and mailboxes all painted the same shade of HOA-approved slate gray. But perfection, I'd learned, was just a mask for control, and control was what Margaret Hensley lived for. I was at the community park with my nephew, Caleb, a weary 7-year-old with a mop of brown hair and a smile that could break your heart. He was kicking a soccer ball against the low wooden fence that separated the playground from the picnic area, each thud echoing in the quiet afternoon. Caleb had been staying with me since his me brother had been deployed overseas. 6 months into his absence, Caleb's mom had walked out, leaving behind a note and a kid who hadn't spoken more than a sentence at a time since. The park was our ritual, our place to pretend the world hadn't cracked open. He'd kick the ball, I'd cheer, and for a few hours, we could both breathe. The park wasn't busy. A couple of kids were on the slides, their laughter sharp and fleeting. A mom pushed a stroller near the benches, her eyes glued to her phone. Caleb lined up his ball for another kick, his tongue poking out in concentration. I leaned against a tree, watching him, feeling the weight of the last 6 months in my chest. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of authority approaching. Clip, clip, clip. The staccato of sensible flats on concrete. My stomach tightened. I knew who it was before I even turned around. Margaret Hensley, the HOA president, marched toward us like a general inspecting a battlefield. Her gray bob was sprayed into a helmet of control, her lips pursed into a line that could cut glass. She wore a navy blazer despite the heat, a silver whistle dangling around her neck like a badge of honor. In her hand was her ever-present tablet, glowing with the digital rule book she wielded like a scepter. Margaret didn't just enforce the HOA's rulish was the HOA. Every fine, every warning letter, every eviction notice in Willow Creek bore her signature. Her scent, her spite. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes narrowing as they landed on Caleb's soccer ball. That, she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the summer haze, is not an approved recreational item for this park. I straightened, my hand resting on the tree trunk. It's a soccer ball, Margaret. He's a kid. Her gaze flicked to me, cold and unyielding. The Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association has clear guidelines, Mr. Carter. Non-regulation equipment is prohibited. Page 17, Section 4, Subsection B. I suggest you review it. Caleb froze, clutching the ball to his chest. His eyes darted to me, wide and uncertain. I stepped forward, placing myself between him and Margaret. He's not hurting anyone. Let him play. Margaret's lips twitched, not quite a smile, more like a predator baring its teeth. Rules exist for a reason. If we allowed every child to bring whatever they pleased, this park would descend into chaos. You wouldn't want that, would you? I felt the heat rising in my chest, but I kept my voice steady. Chaos. It's a kid kicking a ball. The only chaos here is you turning a playground into a prison yard. Her eyes narrowed further, her fingers tightening around the tablet. This is a community, Mr. Carter, not your personal playground. Your nephew isn't even a registered resident. I checked. His name isn't on the approved visitor list. There it was. The jab. The reminder that Caleb and I were outsiders in her perfect little kingdom. My brother's house was technically mine now, at least until he got back. But Margaret had made it clear from day one that I didn't belong. Not me, not Caleb, not anyone who didn't bow to her clipboard monarchy. He's 7, I said, my voice low, dangerous. He's staying with me. He's got as much right to this park as anyone. Margaret tilted her head, her whistle glinting in the sunlight. Rights are earned through compliance. If you can't follow the rules, perhaps you and your guest should find another place to play. Caleb's grip on the ball tightened, his knuckles white. I could see the tremble in his shoulders, the way his eyes dropped to the ground. He hadn't spoken yet, but I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking about his mom, about the way she'd left without a goodbye, about how every adult in his life seemed to have a rule for why he didn't belong. And now here was Margaret, another grown-up telling him he was wrong just for existing. I crouched down, keeping my eyes on her. "Caleb," I said softly, "go kick your ball over by the slide. I'll be right there." He hesitated, then nodded, scurrying off with the ball tucked under his arm. I stood, facing Margaret. The air between us crackled, heavy with something unspoken but inevitable. "You don't get to talk to him like that," I said. "Not now, not ever." Margaret didn't flinch. "I speak to whomever I please. This is my jurisdiction. If you have an issue, take it up with the board. Though I doubt they'll side with someone who can't even submit a proper visitor form." That was it. The line wasn't just crossed, it was obliterated. I felt something shift inside me, something cold and deliberate, like a switch flipping in the dark. I'd dealt with people like Margaret before, bullies who hid behind rules, who used paperwork as a weapon, who thought they could control everything because no one ever pushed back. But I wasn't just anyone, and Caleb wasn't just any kid. "You're done talking," I said, stepping closer. "Walk away. Now." Margaret's tablet hand twitched, but she didn't move. "Threats, Mr. Carter. That's a violation of Section 9, Article 3. I could have you fined for that. Or worse." I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Try it." She didn't expect that. Her mouth opened, then closed like a fish gasping for air. For a moment, I thought she might back off. But Margaret Hensley wasn't the type to retreat. She doubled down, stepping forward, her whistle swinging like a pendulum. "You think you can intimidate me? I've been running this neighborhood for 10 years. I've seen people like you come and go. You don't scare me." I didn't answer. Words were useless now. I glanced over at Caleb, who was kicking his ball against the slide, oblivious to the storm brewing. Then I looked back at Margaret, her smug face, her tablet glowing like a shield. And I knew this wasn't about a soccer ball. This was about power, about who got to decide who belonged, who got to feel safe. And Margaret had just picked the wrong person to push. I turned, walking toward the maintenance shed at the edge of the park. It was a small, weathered structure, half hidden by overgrown bushes, where the groundskeepers kept their tools. Margaret's voice followed me, sharp and grating. "Where do you think you're going? This conversation isn't over." I didn't respond. My hands were steady, my mind clear. The shed door was unlocked. As it always was, nobody in Willow Creek ever thought to lock it. Not with Margaret's rules keeping everyone in line. Inside, it smelled of gasoline and rust. Shovels, rakes, a coil of rope. And there, propped against the wall, a pressure washer. It was an industrial model, heavy, with a hose long enough to reach halfway across the park. I grabbed it, feeling the weight of it in my hands, the cold metal against my palms. It wasn't a leaf blower, but it would do. Oh, it would do. Margaret was still standing by the fence when I returned, dragging the pressure washer behind me. Her eyes widened, just for a second, before she masked it with indignation. "What is that? You can't just—" "Shut up," I said, my voice flat. I dropped the washer at my feet and started uncoiling the hose. The crowd was starting to notice now. A dad looked up from his phone. A kid stopped mid-slide. The mom with the stroller turned, her mouth half open. Margaret took a step back, her tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. "This is vandalism. I'll have you arrested." I didn't look at her. I was too busy plugging the washer into the outdoor outlet by the picnic tables. The machine hummed to life, a low, menacing growl. "You pushed a kid out of his safe space," I said, turning to face her. "You don't get to walk away from that." Her face paled, but she held her ground. "You're unhinged. You're—" I didn't let her finish. I grabbed her arm, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to make her stumble. She yelped, her tablet slipping from her hands and hitting the grass. I pulled her toward the center of the park, where a low, circular platform stood, a relic from some long-forgotten community event, now used by kids as a makeshift stage. It was perfect, wide enough, sturdy enough, and right in the middle of everything. "Let go of me," Margaret shrieked, her flats skidding across the grass. I didn't. I dragged her onto the platform, her arms flailing, her whistle bouncing against her chest. The crowd was growing now, parents and kids forming a loose circle, their phones already out. I didn't care. Let them record. Let the world see. I pushed her down onto the platform, kneeling to grab the coil of rope from the shed. Margaret thrashed, but she was no match for me. I looped the rope around her wrists, tying them to the metal railing that circled the platform. Then her ankles. She kicked, but I was faster, securing her in place. The rope was tight, not cruel, but unyielding. She wasn't going anywhere. "You're insane," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You'll lose everything. Your house, I stood, wiping my hands on my jeans. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about me. It's about Caleb. It's about every kid you've bullied, every family you've fined, every person you've made feel small just because you could." I turned to the pressure washer, adjusting the nozzle to a wide spray. The machine roared louder now, the hose vibrating in my hands. Margaret's eyes darted to it, then back to me. "No," she whispered. "You wouldn't." I leaned in close, my voice low. "You made a choice when you went after my nephew. Now you get to live with it." I squeezed the trigger. A blast of water shot out, hitting the edge of the platform with a force that made the metal sing. Margaret screamed, twisting against the ropes as the spray caught her legs, soaking her blazer. Her pristine bob now plastered to her skull. The platform didn't spin like a saucer, but it didn't need to. The water did the work, drenching her, stripping away the polished facade she'd spent years building. Her whistle slid down her chest, useless, tangled in the ropes. The crowd gasped, then went silent. Phones were still up, capturing every second. A kid laughed, nervous at first, then louder. A mom covered her mouth, but her eyes sparkled with something like approval. Margaret's screams turned to sobs, her voice breaking as the water kept coming, relentless, cold, unforgiving. I didn't stop. Not yet. She'd spent years making people feel powerless, hiding behind her rules, her tablet, her whistle. Now she was the one exposed, her authority dissolving with every drop. I adjusted the nozzle, narrowing the spray, aiming it just above her head. The water arched over her, a mocking halo, while she sputtered and gasped. "Stop it," she cried, her voice raw. "Please." I eased off the trigger, letting the water slow to a trickle. The platform glistened. Margaret's clothes clung to her like a second skin, her makeup running in black streaks down her face. She looked small, broken, human. For the first time, I saw fear in her ice-knit anger, not arrogance, just fear. I crouched beside her, the hose still in my hand. "You don't touch kids," I said, my voice steady. "You don't make them feel like they don't belong. You don't get to play God with people's lives." Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. The crowd was still there, watching, waiting. I stood, turning to face them. "This is what happens when you let someone like her run things unchecked," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "She's not your queen. She's just a bully with a tablet." A murmur rippled through the crowd. A man nodded, his arms crossed. A woman whispered something to her friend, who laughed. And then, from the back, a single clap. Then another, slow, deliberate, like a drumbeat. More joined in, until the sound filled the park. A quiet rebellion against years of Margaret's reign. I turned back to Caleb. He was standing by the slide, his soccer ball at his feet, watching me with wide eyes. I walked over, kneeling beside him. "You okay, buddy?" He nodded, his voice small. "Is she gone?" I glanced back at Margaret, still tied to the platform, her head bowed, water dripping from her hair. "Yeah," I said. "She's done." The crowd didn't disperse right away. Some stayed, still filming, others talking in hushed tones. I untied Margaret, not gently, but not rough either. She didn't fight. She didn't speak. She just sat there, soaked and shivering, as I coiled the rope and dragged the pressure washer back to the shed. By the time I returned, she was gone, her tablet still lying in the grass where it had fallen. I picked it up, the screen cracked but still glowing. A list of names and violations stared back at families she'd targeted, fines she'd issued, lives she'd made harder for no reason other than control. I turned it off and tossed it into the trash can by the picnic tables. Caleb kicked his ball again, the thud echoing in the quiet. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the park. I sat on a bench, watching him play, feeling the weight of what I'd done settle in. Not regret, never regret, but something heavier. Responsibility. I'd drawn a line, and the neighborhood had seen it. What happened next, I didn't know. But I knew one thing: Margaret Hensley's reign was over. And Caleb? He smiled as he kicked the ball, harder this time, the sound sharp and defiant. For the first time in months, he looked like a kid again. Not broken, not scared, just free. The sun had dipped below the horizon by the time Caleb and I left the park, the sky bruising purple over Willow Creek Estates. The air felt different now, sharper, like the world had taken a breath and held it. Caleb clutched his soccer ball under one arm, his other hand in mine. His steps lighter than they'd been in months. He hadn't asked about Margaret, hadn't mentioned the pressure washer or the ropes or the crowd that had clapped, like they were witnessing the fall of a tyrant. He just kicked a pebble along the sidewalk, humming softly, a tune I hadn't heard since before his mom left. For him, the park was safe again. For me, the fight was just beginning. We hadn't made it halfway home before my phone started buzzing. Not calls, texts, notifications, a flood of them. The neighborhood group chat, usually a sleepy thread about lost cats and garage sales, had exploded. I glanced at the screen. Did you see what happened at the park? Is this real? Someone finally put Margaret in her place. A video link popped up, shared by someone named Willow Creekmom to 3. I didn't need to click it to know what it was. The image was burned into my mind. Margaret Hensley, soaked to the bone, tied to the platform, her whistle dangling like a noose, her empire crumbling under a jet of water. I didn't open the video. Not yet. I shoved the phone in my pocket and kept walking, Caleb's hand warm in mine. But the buzz kept coming, relentless, like a swarm of bees. By the time we reached the house, the notifications had doubled. I tucked Caleb into bed, his soccer ball beside his pillow, and promised we'd go back to the park tomorrow. His eyes were heavy, but he smiled a real smile, not the ghost of one I'd gotten used to. Thanks, Uncle Jake, he mumbled before drifting off. I stood in the doorway, watching him sleep, feeling the weight of what I'd done settle deeper. Not guilt, not regret, but something heavier, like the ground shifting beneath me. Downstairs, I finally opened the group chat. The video had 100 views already, and it hadn't even been an hour. The comments were a mix of shock, glee, and cautious support. She had it coming. Is this legal? I've got my own Margaret, storied me. Someone had posted a screenshot of Margaret's tablet, the cracked screen still glowing with her list of violations. Another shared a photo of her abandoned whistle, lying in the grass like a relic of a fallen regime. I scrolled through, my jaw tight. People were waking up, but I knew Margaret wouldn't go quietly. Bullies like her never did. By morning, the video had gone viral, not just in Willow Creek, but beyond. It had jumped from the group chat to TikTok, then X, then local Facebook groups. Someone had edited it with a dramatic soundtrack, violins swelling as the water hit Margaret, her screams syncing perfectly with a bass drop. The caption read, "HOA Karen gets hosed, justice served." The views were climbing past 10,000. Comments poured in, not just from neighbors but from strangers across the country. This is every HOA ever. Give this man a medal. She pushed a kid. Spin her again. The remixes were relentless. One looped Margaret's shriek over a techno beat. Another slowed it down, her mascara-streaked face frozen in a cartoonish wail. I didn't laugh. I didn't share it. I didn't need to. The truth was doing its work, spreading like wildfire, burning through Margaret's carefully curated image. But I wasn't naive. I knew there'd be consequences. People like Margaret didn't just lose power, they lashed out, clawing at anything to drag you down with them. I braced for it, checking the locks on the doors, keeping Caleb close. The first sign came at noon. A police cruiser pulled into the cul-de-sac, slow and deliberate, parking in front of my brother's house. 2 officers stepped out, their faces unreadable. I met them at the door, my heart steady but my hands clenched. Caleb was in the backyard, kicking his ball against the fence, oblivious. I wanted to keep it that way. "Mr. Jacob Carter," the older officer asked, his badge glinting in the sunlight. "That's me," I said, stepping onto the porch. "We got a complaint. Assault, vandalism, unlawful restraint. Filed by Margaret Hensley. Care to tell us what happened at the park yesterday?" I didn't flinch. I'd expected this. She shoved my nephew off a playground platform. "He's 7. I reacted. "She's fine, isn't she?" The younger officer raised an eyebrow, glancing at his partner. "She's claiming injuries. Emotional distress, too." Says you tied her up and attacked her with a pressure washer. I snorted. Injuries. She was screaming loud enough to wake the dead. And emotional distress? She's been dishing that out to this neighborhood for years. Ask anyone. The older officer's mouth twitched, like he was fighting a smile. We've had calls about her before. Lots of them. But this is serious, Mr. Carter. There's video evidence. You tied her to a platform. I did, I said, meeting his eyes. And I'd do it again if it meant protecting my nephew. They didn't arrest me. Not yet. They took my statement, asked about Caleb, and left with a warning to stay available. As the cruiser pulled away, I saw curtains twitch across the street. Neighbors were watching, waiting. I didn't care. Let them stare. Let them talk. I'd done what I had to. By evening, the HOA called an emergency meeting. I got the email while Caleb and I were eating pizza in the living room. His laughter filling the space as he tried to balance a slice on his nose. The subject line was cold, urgent, community standards violation hearing. It didn't say Margaret's name, but it didn't need to. The meeting was at 7 p.m. at the community center. Attendance wasn't optional, not for me. I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay with Caleb, keep him away from the mess I'd stirred up. But I knew Margaret would be there, spinning her story, painting herself as the victim. I couldn't let that stand. I called Mrs. Delaney, the widow next door who'd always had a soft spot for Caleb, and asked her to watch him. She agreed, no questions asked, her eyes glinting with something like pride when she said, "Give him hell, Jake." The community center was packed when I arrived. Folding chairs lined the room, every one filled. Neighbors I hadn't seen in months were there, whispering, glancing at me as I walked in. The air smelled of coffee and tension. At the front, a long table held the HOA board, 5 members, all looking uncomfortable, except for Margaret. She sat in the center, her hair back in its perfect bob, her blazer replaced with a crisp white blouse. No whistle, no tablet, but her eyes were sharp, her lips pressed into a line of righteous fury. She looked like she'd already won. The meeting started with the usual nonsense, minutes from the last meeting, a budget update. I sat in the back, arms crossed, waiting. Finally, the board chair, a nervous man named Greg with a comb-over, cleared his throat. "We're here to address an incident at the community park yesterday involving Mr. Jacob Carter and our president, Mrs. Margaret Hensley." Margaret stood, her voice steady but laced with venom. "Yesterday, I was assaulted in broad daylight while enforcing our community's rules. Mr. Carter, an unregistered resident, tied me to a platform and attacked me with a pressure washer in front of witnesses. This was not just a violation of HOA policy, but a criminal act. I demand his immediate eviction and a full investigation." The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. I stood, slow and deliberate, feeling the weight of their stares. She's leaving out the part where she shoved my 7-year-old nephew off a platform. "For kicking a soccer ball," I said, my voice carrying. "Caleb's been through enough. He lost his mom, his dad's overseas, and she decided to make him feel like he didn't belong here. I didn't assault her. I showed her what happens when you hurt a kid." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Margaret's face reddened, but she didn't back down. "That child was breaking rules. The park is for approved residents only." I was within my rights. "Your rights," I cut her off, stepping forward. "You don't have the right to put your hands on a kid. You don't have the right to make people feel like they're less than you, just because they don't kiss your rule book." The room erupted. Voices overlapped, some angry, some cheering. A woman in the front row stood up. "She fined me $500 for planting tulips instead of roses." A man near the door shouted. "She threatened to evict my mom for having a bird feeder." More voices joined in. A chorus of grievances. Years of bottled-up frustration spilling out. Margaret's eyes darted around, her composure cracking. Greg banged a gavel, shouting for order, but no one listened. I didn't need to say more. The neighborhood was doing it for me. Stories poured out. Margaret's fines for unapproved mailbox colors. Her letters threatening foreclosure over unmowed lawns. Her calls to the city about unsightly kids' toys. One man, his voice shaking, told how she'd reported his disabled daughter to child services for playing in the cul-de-sac without a permit. The room was a powder keg, and I'd lit the fuse. Greg finally restored order, his face pale. We'll take this under advisement. The board will vote on disciplinary action for Mr. Carter and review Mrs. Hensley's leadership. Margaret's head snapped up. My leadership? This is outrageous. I've kept this neighborhood pristine for a decade. Pristine, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. You've kept it scared. There's a difference. The meeting ended in chaos, with no decision made. I walked out, the night air cool against my skin. My phone was buzzing again, more notifications, more shares. The video had hit 100,000 views. A local news station had picked it up. HOA president doused in public confrontation over child's safety. The headline was tame compared to the comments. People were calling for Margaret's removal, for lawsuits, for justice. The next morning, I woke to a knock at the door. Mrs. Delaney stood there, holding a tray of muffins and a smile that could light up the block. You're the talk of the town, Jake, she said, stepping inside. Half the neighborhood wants to throw you a parade. The other half's scared you'll hose them necks. I laughed, but it was hollow. What's Margaret doing? Mrs. Delaney's smile faded. She's not giving up. Posted a statement on the HOA website last night. Called you a violent transient and said she's pressing charges. She's trying to rally the board, but it's backfiring. People are done with her. I nodded, pouring her a coffee. Caleb was upstairs, still asleep, his soccer ball tucked under his arm. I didn't want him to hear this, to know the fight wasn't over, but I knew I had to face it. For him. Over the next few days, the neighborhood split into camps. Most were on my side, leaving casseroles on my porch, sending messages of support. You did what we all wanted to. Thank you for standing up. A few, though, were loyal to Margaret older residents who valued order over everything, who saw her rules as the glue holding Willow Creek together. They left anonymous notes in my mailbox. You're a disgrace. Leave before you ruin everything. Margaret didn't show her face in public, but her presence lingered. Her car stayed parked in her driveway, curtains drawn. Rumors swirled. She was meeting with lawyers, planning a defamation suit, even talking to the city council about banning me from public spaces. But the videos kept spreading, and with them, the stories. A Reddit thread popped up, Willow Creek HOA horror stories, with dozens of posts detailing Margaret's reign of terror. A retired teacher shared how Margaret had fined her for having a non-compliant welcome mat. A single dad posted about her threatening to tow his car for parking too close to a curb. The thread grew, and so did the pressure. By the end of the week, the HOA board called another meeting. This time, it wasn't just about might, it was about Margaret. The email was blunt. Vote on leadership and community standards. I knew what it meant. They were deciding her fate, and maybe mine. I showed up early, Caleb at home with Mrs. Delaney. The community center was even more crowded than before, standing room only. Margaret was there, her face pale but composed, her whistle back around her neck like a talisman. She didn't look at me, but I felt her anger, sharp and cold, from across the room. Greg opened the meeting, his voice shaky. After reviewing the incident and community feedback, we've proposed a motion to remove Mrs. Hensley as HOA president, effective immediately. The room exploded again, cheers mixing with boos. Margaret stood, her hands trembling. This is a witch hunt. I've dedicated my life to this community, and you're throwing it away for a vigilante who attacked me. A woman in the back stood up. You attacked us first, Margaret. For years. You made my kids afraid to play outside. You fined me for a crack in my driveway. You're not a letter, you're a dictator. The crowd roared in agreement. Margaret's face crumpled, her mask slipping. She tried to speak, but her voice was drowned out. Greg banged the gavel, calling for a vote. It was quick, unanimous. Margaret was out. Her seat vacated, her authority stripped. She stood there, frozen, as the room clapped, not sarcastic this time, but triumphant. I didn't join in. I didn't need to. I'd already said what I needed to with a pressure washer and a coil of rope. As I left, a man I didn't know clapped me on the shoulder. You did good, Carter. About time someone stood up. I nodded, but my mind was on Caleb. I got home, thanked Mrs. Delaney, and checked on him. He was asleep, his soccer ball still beside him. I sat on the edge of his bed, watching his chest rise and fall. The fight wasn't over, not completely. Margaret might sue, the police might come back, but for now, Caleb was safe, and that was enough. The next morning, I took him back to the park. The platform was gone, dismantled overnight, replaced with a new bench. A small plaque was bolted to it, simple and unassuming, Caleb's Corner, for every kid who deserves to play. I didn't know who'd done it, but it didn't matter. The neighborhood was waking up, remembering what it meant to be a community, not a prison. Caleb kicked his ball, laughing as it bounced off the slide. I sat on the bench, the plaque cool under my fingers. Margaret was gone, but her shadow lingered. I knew she'd try something people like her always did. But I was ready. For Caleb, for this neighborhood, for the line I'd drawn in the sand. The morning after Margaret Hensley's ousting, Willow Creek Estates felt like a neighborhood holding its breath. The sun rose as it always did, painting the identical beige houses in soft gold. But the air was different, lighter, like a storm had passed and left the world scrubbed clean. Caleb was already up, kicking his soccer ball against the garage door. Each thud a small rebellion against the silence that had gripped our lives for months. I watched him from the kitchen window, coffee in hand, feeling the weight of the last week settle into my bones. Not exhaustion, not fear, but something deeper, a quiet certainty that we'd crossed a threshold we couldn't uncross. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since the HOA meeting. The group chat was alive with plans, a new park committee, a petition to rewrite the HOA bylaws, even talk of a block party to reclaim the neighborhood. The video of Margaret's dousing had hit 500,000 views, spawning memes, hashtags, and a local news segment that played on loop at the diner down the street. Josephy HOA was trending on X, alongside clips of Margaret's mascara-streaked face set to everything from heavy metal to classical piano. But I didn't scroll through them. I didn't need to. The truth was out, and it was doing its work, peeling back the layers of Margaret's reign like paint stripped from a rotting fence. Caleb bounded inside, his cheeks flushed. "Can we go to the park, Uncle Jake? I want to try the slide." I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Sure, buddy. Let me grab my shoes." The park was busier than usual, even for a Sunday. Kids ran across the grass, their laughter sharp and free. Parents clustered near the benches, talking in low, excited tones. The new bench, Caleb's Corner, gleamed in the sunlight, its plaque a quiet promise that this place belonged to everyone now. Caleb made a beeline for the slide, his soccer ball tucked under his arm. I sat on the bench, the wood cool against my back, and watched him climb the ladder. His movements sure and unafraid. For the first time in months, he looked like he belonged. But I wasn't naive. Margaret's absence didn't mean peace. People like her didn't vanish. They regrouped, schemed, struck back. I'd seen it before, in the army, in life. Bullies didn't lose gracefully. They clung to their power, even when it was just a shadow. I kept my eyes on the park's entrance, half expecting her navy blazer and sensible flats to appear, her whistle swinging like a weapon. She didn't show, but her presence lingered, a ghost in the whispers of the parents, the cautious glances of the kids. The first sign of trouble came at noon. A white SUV pulled into the parking lot, its tinted windows reflecting the sun like a warning. A man stepped out, mid-40s, suit crisp despite the heat, a briefcase in hand. He scanned the park, his eyes landing on me. I didn't move, but my grip on the bench tightened. He approached, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the grass. "Jacob Carter?" he asked, his voice smooth, practiced. "Who's asking?" I said, standing. He extended a card. "Richard Ellison, attorney at law. I represent Margaret Hensley. I'm here to discuss the incident at the park and the legal ramifications of your actions." I didn't take the card. Ramifications? She shoved a 7-year-old. I reacted. End of story. Ellison's smile was thin, like a blade. "Not quite. Mrs. Hensley is pursuing charges as battery, false imprisonment, defamation. She's also filing a civil suit for emotional distress and reputational damage. The video circulating online has caused significant harm." I laughed, cold and sharp. "Harm? She's been harming this neighborhood for years, fining people for flowers, threatening kids for playing. You want to talk reputational damage? Ask the families she's terrorized." Ellison didn't flinch. The law doesn't care about your grievances, Mr. Carter. It cares about evidence. You tied her to a platform and doused her with a pressure washer. There's video. Witnesses. This won't end well for you unless you cooperate. Cooperate? I stepped closer, my voice low. Tell your client to drop this. She's lucky I stopped at water. She comes after me or my nephew again. It won't be a hose next time. His eyes narrowed, but he didn't push. He slipped the card into my jacket pocket. You'll hear from us. I suggest you get a lawyer. He turned and walked back to his SUV, the engine purring as it pulled away. I watched until it disappeared, my jaw tight. Caleb was still on the slide, laughing as he raced another kid to the bottom. I didn't tell him about the lawyer. I didn't want to dim that light in his eyes, not when he'd just found it again. That night, I called my brother, stationed halfway across the world. It was early morning there, his voice groggy but steady. I told him everything, Margaret, the park, the video, the lawyer. He listened, quiet, until I finished. You did the right thing, Jake, he said finally. Caleb's all that matters. Whatever happens, you keep him safe. I will, I said, my throat tight. Always. The next few days were a blur of tension and support. Neighbors rallied around me, leaving notes on my porch offering to testify if it came to court. Mrs. Delaney organized a Caleb's Corner fundraiser to add new equipment to the park swings. A climbing wall. Things Margaret had vetoed as too risky. The group chat buzzed with ideas for reforming the HOA. Term limits, transparency. No more fines for petty violations. It felt like the neighborhood was waking up, shaking off years of fear. But I knew Margaret wasn't done. Her silence was too loud, too calculated. Her next move came on Wednesday. I was at the grocery store, Caleb in the cart, tossing a box of cereal into the basket, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, a link to a website. I hesitated, then clicked. The page loaded, bold red letters screaming across the screen. Justice for Margaret Hensley. Below was a photo of her, pre-dousing, her bob perfect, her smile serene, like a martyr in a painting. The text was a manifesto, accusing me of being a violent drifter who'd orchestrated a public lynching to seize control of the HOA. It claimed the video was edited, the witnesses coerced, Caleb's fall exaggerated. There was a donation button for her legal defense fund, and a petition to reinstate her as president. I stared at the screen, my blood cold. Caleb tugged at my sleeve. What's wrong, Uncle Jake? Nothing, buddy, I lied, pocketing the phone. Let's get some ice cream. But it wasn't nothing. By evening, the website had spread through the neighborhood, shared by Margaret's loyalists, those few who still saw her as the guardian of order. Anonymous emails hit the group chat, accusing me of everything from vandalism to child endangerment. A few neighbors wavered, their support cooling, their messages vague. Maybe we should hear her side. What if she sues the HOA? I didn't blame them. Fear was Margaret's weapon, and she was wielding it from the shadows. The breaking point came Friday night. I was at the park with Caleb, watching him kick his ball against the new climbing wall, when a crowd gathered at the community center across the street. Cars lined the lot, more than I'd seen since the last HOA meeting. I recognized some faces. Delaney, the single dad who'd spoken out, the woman fined for tulips. But there were others, strangers, holding signs, justice for Margaret. Stop the mob. My stomach sank. She'd planned this a counter rally, a last stand. I told Caleb to stay near the slide and cross the street. The crowd was small, maybe 30 people, but loud, chanting Margaret's name. She stood on the steps of the community center, microphone in hand, her whistle gleaming against a black dress that made her look like a widow mourning her own empire. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned, sharp and unyielding. This neighborhood is under attack, she said, her voice carrying over the chants. A violent outsider has turned our community against itself, spreading lies, inciting chaos. I've served you for 10 years, kept your homes safe, your values intact, and this is how you repay me. With humiliation? With betrayal? The crowd cheered, but it was thin, forced. I scanned the face. Most were her old allies, the ones who'd benefited from her rules, who'd snitched on neighbors for extra clout. But there were others hesitant, caught in her spell. I stepped forward, pushing through the crowd, my hands clenched. "You want to talk betrayal?" I called out, my voice cutting through hers. "Talk about the fines you slapped on single moms for broken fences. The eviction notices you sent to retirees for unpaid dues. The kids you scared out of this park because they didn't fit your rule book." Margaret's eyes locked on mine, her lips curling. "You're a liar, Mr. Carter. A thug who thinks he can bully his way into power." The crowd murmured, splitting, some nodding at her, others turning to me. I didn't back down. "You shoved my nephew, Margaret, a 7-year-old. You made him feel like he didn't belong. And you did it to everyone else, too. That's not leadership. That's cruelty." A woman in the crowd gasped. Another shouted, "He's right." The chants faltered. Margaret's grip on the microphone tightened, her knuckles white. "You have no proof," she hissed. "Just a doctored video and a mob of ingrates." I pulled out my phone, holding it up. "No proof. The video's got 1 million views now. Your website's got your lies, but the truth's louder. You're done, Margaret. Let it go." Her face twisted, and for a moment, I thought she'd lunge at me. But she didn't. She turned to the crowd, her voice rising to a shriek. "You'll regret this. All of you. You think you can replace me? You'll beg for my rules when this place falls apart." The crowd fractured. Her supporters surged forward, shouting, but others pushed back, arguing, defending me. Defending Caleb. It wasn't a fight, not yet, but it was close. I saw Mrs. Delaney in the fray, her voice sharp, calling for calm. I didn't stay. I turned and ran back to the park, where Caleb was waiting, his eyes wide. "Is she mad?" he asked, clutching his ball. "Yeah," I said, kneeling beside him. "But she's not gonna hurt you. Not anymore." We went home, the noise of the rally fading behind us. That night, the group chat lit up again. The rally had fizzled out, Margaret's supporters outnumbered by neighbors who'd had enough. Her website was reported, taken down by morning. Her petition stalled at 50 signatures. The HOA board issued a statement. Margaret Hensley is permanently barred from leadership roles. No one clapped this time. They didn't need to. The war was over. Weeks passed, and Willow Creek changed. The park got its new swings, paid for by the fundraiser. Kids played without looking over their shoulders. The HOA meetings were quieter, led by Mrs. Delaney, who pushed for open forums. No more secret fines. Neighbors started talking again, not just complaining, but planning barbecues, book clubs, a soccer league for kids like Caleb. The plaque on Caleb's corner became a symbol, not just of one day, but of what happened when people stood up. Margaret didn't disappear completely. She stayed in her house, curtains drawn, her car rarely moving. Whispers followed her sightings at the gas station, her face pale, no whistle, no blazer. She didn't sue, didn't press charges. Maybe she knew it was pointless, or maybe she'd finally seen herself in the mirror I'd held up. I didn't care. She was a ghost now, irrelevant. Caleb changed, too. He talked more, laughed louder, kicked his ball with a confidence I hadn't seen before. One evening, at the park, he ran up to me, breathless, holding a drawing. It was the slide, the bench, him and me, stick figures under a bright sun. "For you," he said, grinning. I hugged him, my throat tight. "It's perfect, buddy." That night, I sat on the porch, the drawing in my hands. My brother called, his voice clearer this time. He'd seen the video, read the news. "You're a hero, Jake," he said. "Caleb's lucky to have you." "I'm no hero," I said. "Just an uncle who didn't look away." He laughed, soft and proud. "That's enough." The neighborhood wasn't perfect. There were still disputes, still rules, still people who grumbled. But the fear was gone, replaced by something fragile but real hope. Caleb's corner wasn't just a bench. It was a promise, a line in the sand, a reminder that bullies only win when you let them. I kept one thing from that day, the lawyer's card, tucked in my wallet. Not as a trophy, but as a warning. Margaret was gone, but there'd be others, different names, different uniforms. Same hunger for control. I'd be ready. For Caleb, for Willow Creek, for anyone who needed someone to stand up. Justice isn't always a courtroom. Sometimes it's a pressure washer, a crowd that finally speaks, a kid who laughs again. I didn't act for glory. I acted for family. Because when someone hurts the innocent, when they hide behind rules and power, someone has to draw the line. And sometimes that someone is you. If you've ever seen a bully fall, if you've ever stood up when no one else would, you know what I mean. Willow Creek learned it. Caleb learned it. I learned it. And if you're out there, facing your own Margaret, remember this: the smallest push can topple the biggest tyrant. Don't stay silent. Don't look away. Draw your line and hold it.